All right, guys, welcome. I am so excited for this week. This week, instead of a woman, I have a man because, as we know, a lot more women are up to share their stories and men not so much. But I'm so excited that he said yes to this. He reached out to me when he saw my post, and he is a fellow adoptee, which I'm so excited. And everybody has a story to tell. This is somebody that I actually went to high school with. His name is Greg, and I'm so excited for you guys to hear his story because every story is different and it's so much fun to learn. And just every story is different. And so somebody always has something to bring to the table. So I will go ahead and turn the time over to him.
Hello, I'm Greg, and like when I said, we went to high school together, and yeah, so she got to see when high school when I was into art back then, and so my story entails kind of art is the key factor that ties a lot of my story together. Um, my adoption story started back when I was actually 4 days old. My adopted parents could not have children of their own, and so they had been looking for a way to adopt and to have kids and to bring kids into their home. And they first went through the route of adoption. And so back then in the 80s, they had to sign up basically on a list and um, get themselves kind of in a place where they could be up next, to have a child. It wasn't as open as it is these days and everything. It was very closed. The birth mom didn't really have any contact or anything much to go off of. Um, so anyways, they adopted me in December of 86. And throughout the years growing up, I always had questions more of pertaining to knowing like what do my parents or what does my birth mom look like, or like where do these features come from. And it wasn't any sort of resentment or feelings of feeling like I was bitter or anything of that sort towards her. It was only like the way that my adopted mom told me the story that I got at going to bed was my adoption story when they went to pick me up at the hospital. And so my adopted mom, I have to like juggle, have to talk about my mom's here. So my adopted mom, she would always tell me about the story of how my birth mom loved me so much, but knew that that I had parents that wanted to have me like a mom and a dad. And that's kind of like the way she poised it. And so I was able to have nothing but happiness towards and feelings towards my own birth mother, and not knowing that I would ever meet her one day, not knowing the possibilities, but just as I grew up, turns out that we actually adopted a little sister as well. So at 5 years old, I have a sister, or had a sister, still have her, that she was also adopted from a different family though. And so it was kind of fun to both share that quality of us both being adopted. And it was kind of fun because there were features that were fun while their kids got to look like each other. Like, you'd know who the so-and-sos were and just by their features and how they looked. My sister and I, like, we kind of could pick out things that were details that we looked like each other a little bit, even though we had no blood relation. So it was kind of fun, but we always talked about and wondered about, like, where did these features come from? How did I get this? And for me, how did I end up at 5'7" on the short end of the scale a little bit? No, but I just, it was kind of fun. So as I grew up, I was way into art, and it's always been something that I've gone after and chased after creativity and ways to express myself, and everything from painting to drawing to graphic design and everything in between. And actually, so I had a, oh my gosh, I lost my place. So I in my own life story, right? So I was going to school after high school. So I did art all through high school and stuff. But then after high school, I decided to continue to pursue that by going to college for art, graphic design, and studying it and pursuing those skills and the talents and that I have. And so as I was going, I actually ended up marrying a young lady who she had herself placed the baby for adoption before we met. So it was a really cool experience to come full circle so that we could both be on both ends of that, where I was adopted and then she had placed her baby for adoption. Um, and so it was a neat experience. And I learned a lot of insight, especially through that experience of just how much she cared and thought about her child. And so I could only imagine how much my own birth mom thought about me. And that was when the wheels started to really turn, with like wanting to one day meet her, and if anything, just thank her for her like incredibly selfless sacrifice, to know that she couldn't provide and give me everything that she wanted to, and then knowing that like someone else on the other side of things could absolutely be blessed with a baby in their life. So it's a really cool experience to kind of to get those wheels turning and to learn that. So I started to explore a little bit, just tiny baby steps into learning where I came from, and trying to find any clues, any hints, any breadcrumbs that I could find. Um, I found very little, because back then it was like 2012, I think, when I first started looking, and I was just, there were like different processes to go through, and there was a lot of hoops to jump through. It was more difficult, and um, so anyways, life went on, and unfortunately got divorced, but still learned a lot from, you know, being married and having this lovely young woman who gave her own child for adoption, and then going on to went to a different school and studied art a little bit longer. I actually went out to Germany for a bit and studied out there, summer of 2014, and got a cool opportunity. So as I continued to study art and grow with those talents, I then had an opportunity a couple of years later to go work traveling the country for a software company for a job. And I absolutely wanted to travel, so I jumped on the opportunity. And as I was going, I actually got placed on a team that had 5 people out of like, I think 8 or so that were adopted. All of us were adopted. So each of us kind of had our own stories, our narratives, where we had kind of come from, and our question marks, huge question marks, but they were all different, but all very cool. One of the guys actually did one of the ancestry.com and the 23andMe tests. And through it, he found his half siblings, and it was incredible. It led to him finding his, like, I think his own birth mother. And he was like, oh, I think he's like almost 50 now, I would say, just like barely into his 50s. And so, I mean, he went a long time in his life not knowing, uh, and so it was cool. It was cool for us to like swap stories, and that got me excited to learn and to kind of like venture out and see what I could find out. So I did. I got both the 23andMe and the Ancestry.com test kits to do for the DNA. Plus, I was curious about like, what are my genetics? Like, what do I have history-wise? Like, am I gonna bald by the time I'm hitting like, 35? If I have a couple of years left, and then just everything. I wanted to know, and I thought it was really fascinating to get to learn about those things. So I got those tests done, got them back, and it was really interesting to find out like everything, right? Because my adopted parents, there's that story, their narrative where they come from, and I can follow theirs back, and there's their rich history of their ancestry coming over from Europe and whatnot. And I didn't know what I was made up of. Like, where did this really curly ass hair come from? And that was one thing that set me apart from my family. I got super curly hair, and anyways, so turns out that I was like a huge mix. I'm like a mutt of all these different ethnic backgrounds, not just Northern Europe and Western Europe, but like down into the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, Portuguese, and then I even have like 4% native Mexican in me too. And so I am made up of all these different, like, tons of different countries and backgrounds and ancestry. So it was really cool to find that out. And then the other thing that it does is it allows you to basically, you can have a privacy setting where you can be open to seeing who your matches are, who your DNA matches are, and who they match up with. And so of course I was like, yeah, I'm gonna leave mine open. You never know. And it showed me that I had like a couple of second cousins and third cousins on there. And so it was interesting to look at their pictures and not know, big question marks still, because it's still like enough removed that no idea. But that I could reach out and I could like try asking. And I didn't, because just like I didn't know how much, or because they had all such different last names. Excuse me. There's different last names that they were like, just didn't know where to start. So it was cool though, because I with more and more people getting them, more and more people would like show up as showing as my relatives and stuff, right? Um, and so one day in October of 2019, or maybe it was like September, I gotta be better about my dates, but it was last year, that well, prior to that, I had decided in 2018 that I was going to go back to school. I just had this drawing, like this draw to go back and finish my degree in Bachelor of Fine Arts. And so I quit traveling for work and I went back to school. And as I was going, that's when, pursuing this passion for art that I have, that I actually matched up with my biological grandma. So my birth mom's mom, and I matched. We didn't know because it just said close relatives, and we had like a high matching. You know what I mean? And so she reached out to me and said, "Hey, I see that we were like very close, and I wanted to find out more about like you and where you're from." And now I find out that like she was absolutely wondering if I was the grandchild that that her daughter placed and that she never got to see grow up. And anyway, so she she messaged me and I said, let's line some dates, let's talk back and forth, and we did. And next thing you know, I find out that she is my biological grandma, that she herself lives here in Utah. And she, not only that, but she's an art teacher. She has been an artist her whole life, and she taught at Cottonwood High School for quite a few years, which is just nuts, blows my mind, right? And then on top of that, so when I had studied art in Germany, I was going to Utah State at the time, and it turns out that my great grandfather was also a very renowned artist in the community, and he was actually made the head of the art department at Utah State University in 1947. So craziness, just blowing my mind, that like, because I'd always figured that my interest in art had been more of a I don't know, more of like an interest, more of just like a natural, yeah, I think it's something I'm into. You're either into it or you're not. And some people have more of an eye, kind of like perfect pitch, right? With like someone who has perfect pitch doesn't mean they're going to sing. It doesn't mean that they're like drawn to art. It's just, or not to art, to music. It's something they can do. But yeah, so little did I realize, and kind of blew my mind, that art and creativity and things, something of that sort, can actually be a hereditary thing. And it's just crazy. So I, through my birth grandmother, was able to get contact information with my birth mother. And so it took a little bit of time, because I mean that was kind of huge to her too. She just like wanted to reach out, but at the same time she wasn't sure if she was ready to or not. So there's a lot of things, a lot of factors that went into it, with her feeling like she was worried. She was so worried that like I was going to be resentful, that I was going to feel like abandoned, or like that she had any reason, for me to feel angry at her or something of the sort. So, but once she got over those fears and she felt comfortable, we had a phone call in February of this year. And that first phone call was 4.5 hours long. We literally just like connected and had like an immediate just connection with everything. I mean, we just talked and talked, and we told stories the same, and crazy amazing tangents with, oh yeah, you need to know this backstory of this story, but we'll lead to this story. Anyway, so those 4.5 hours passed by pretty quick, but it was pretty awesome to just like to be talking with my birth mom. She had agreed that I agreed, but I invited her and I wanted her to come to my graduation because that was coming up soon, for graduating from from college with my Bachelor of Fine Arts. And what she also thought was so cool, she can do art. She didn't want to really live in those expectations of her own, parents and grandparents and stuff like that. But she, I've seen her stuff, and she can create. Uh, so we agreed that she was going to come to my graduation. Of course, this year of all years, the pandemic hit, and so my graduation got postponed, and schools got closed, and so it was a weird year. It's been a very weird year with all of that going on, right? For us to try and meet. But I also, in talking to her, found out that she has 3 daughters, and that they're all my half sisters, and so very cool thing to find out, that they're out there. And she's actually from California, which I have so many ties myself to California, which was so cool to find out. So, um, but yeah, so she was anyway. So she told me about her 3 daughters, and I heard 2 of them are going to school, up in Idaho, and so she would drive through Utah all the time. She has family in Utah, so she wanted to stop by, stop in, and so she would plan it so that she could come, for the graduation. Well, unfortunately, since the graduation didn't happen in May with everything going on, it got pushed to August, which was still perfect timing because she was bringing one of her daughters down. Um, and so I was able to invite her to still come to my graduation, in August of this year. And that's where we first met. So we went a couple hours earlier prior to it and just hung out and just talked and talked and talked and showed her all sorts of things, from art to just laughing our heads off over just the funniest of stories. I mean, we're just the same. Like it's uncanny how alike we truly are. Um, and so it was the coolest experience to be able to talk with her. Um, then through that, I was able to actually go and hang out and meet 2 of my step or not step, but half sisters. The other one still is living in California, and wasn't able to make it, but 2 of them actually live down in Riverton area, I think. And yeah, so we were able to meet up and hang out, and we got along so well. Um, they're those 2 are 21 and 22, and then my other half sister is 26. And so I went down there, had dinner with them a couple times, and then, um, just really got to spend a lot of time hanging out with my birth mom and learning all sorts of stories of cool things that she experienced, swapping stories myself from my childhood, um, and actually like being able to share things. And then she even got me some art, that my great grandfather did, which was so cool. Like here's 2 pieces I have. These are some watercolors of just some funky dudes that he painted, right? So pretty rad there. And then another one on this side. Um, so it's been some cool stuff, that I've been learning and really being able to like just grow my family. It's not anything of the sort where she's replacing my adopted mom. And that was, I think, a fear on both sides, that both would feel that way. And it was actually the opposite. She went with me early to the graduation, and then my adopted parents and my sister came a little bit later, met up with us. And so I've got to like hang out with all of my family members right there, which was so cool to me, um, to see them and to hang out with all of them. And yeah, so she, um, told me all sorts of things. I had just kind of gotten into painting, for my thesis, painting things like plants, adding a lot of plants into my paintings. And as it turns out, she's obsessed with plants, and she has like a crazy green thumb where she can bring any plant to life, grow anything. And she even brought me a plant out that she had been growing, um, from her home. So just the coolest of things. And now here we are, like we text every single day and we talk all the time. Um, and so it's an additional person in my life now that I have, that I can reach out to and lean on, and it's brought her on that side of things so much closure to knowing that she made the right decision basically, and that she gave me more, and that she gave me the opportunity to like take off and excel. And here I am with my mind blown that I chase after art of all things, you know. I went down that natural path of chasing after art, and little did I know that I just like come from this really rich background of art. Um, so it has been a very, very cool experience for me this year.
No, I think that's amazing. And I love how you touched on like now all the families are together because that's how it is. And being like a fellow adoptee too, it's you're never replacing anybody. For me, and it sounds like for you too, no resentment at all, just more thank you for what you did because of the huge sacrifice. And it's just so awesome that you guys have had that because I know not all stories end up that way. So it's just amazing and it's wonderful. And I'm trying to think of like, for people who are per se maybe wanting to pursue adoption, what is it, some advice you would give them for like the feelings of the unknown and everything? I mean, I know there's tests you can do and all those sorts of things, but what advice would you give people who maybe want to pursue finding their parents, their birth parents?
So I have been very lucky. I have been extremely blessed with having my story. My story is, I mean, it's a pretty cool origin story, but not all stories are like that. And so I was prepared for whatever came my way. Um, Totally unexpected and totally awesome how it all came together. But you know, there's all sorts of ways that kids are put into adopted situations, and it some of them, and for her especially, she had some. There were some moments where she had some difficulties with kind of reliving, going back to those days of how painful it was to let go of me, because it's a huge sacrifice, you know. And I was so grateful for my ex-wife, because had I not seen that side of things, I don't think I would have necessarily been able to fathom how much pain that truly was and how hard that was for her, you know. And so seeing her receive that closure of me, how I've grown up and stuff, that has been huge for her. So with that, or also with looking for my adopted parents, like, you know, being able to just be open to the whatever would come. You know, my sister, I think, is similar boat with looking for hers, that she kind of had to also be a little bit more on um the more unexpected side of like not expecting her story to turn out as, you know, as crazy as mine has. I've been, like I said, very lucky. um and so yeah, to those who are interested in seeking out their parents, I say go for it though. Learn the story, learn where you come from, do what you can. And even if it isn't the greatest of stories, like, you still learn and you can give somebody closure that perhaps they didn't think they'd ever get to their whole life, you know.
No, I think that's awesome and amazing. Is there anything else you want to touch on? I love it because you just went through all of it and like you seriously touched all the bases of all the questions because you went over, you know, how birth mom feels, how you feel, all those kinds of things, which I love because you answered it all. So it was perfect. Anything else you want to add on there?
um it's just, adoption's cool. Adoption is such a cool thing. It, like, not only is it amazing on many levels for both like the adopted parents, for the kid, or the, you know, whomever being adopted, and uh you know, the birth mom, there is a bit of the pain, but there's also like a bit of relief knowing that kid's going to be able to get what they couldn't provide, you know, and something that they can have. And so it's just cool to add that much more awesomeness to stories of our lives, you know, of our growing up, of anybody's life, of the interconnected web of life, that what it is, you know, we're all connected in one way or another. It's just crazy to me that, um, even since meeting her, how many connections there are through adoption to so many different people. I mean, look at my ex-wife, you know, I look at my sister, my birth mom, right? And I've learned all these really cool things. So yeah, adoption's cool. I
And
recommend.
that's awesome. I love it. Seriously, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it because collecting these stories, I just love it. I love because you can learn from so much. And I know there's so many people just with the unknowns and you want to hear all sides of the story, whether you want to pursue adoption or you have been adopted or, you know what I mean, you're a birth mom. So I love it. Seriously, thank you so much for taking some time to do this with me. I really, really appreciate it.
For sure.